This is my Stiga Park 520p, which I bought new in 2018. Over the past few years, I've come to the conclusion that this is the best and the worst mower that I've ever owned. And I know that is a huge contradiction, so let me tell you all the reasons why I like this machine and why I don't like it. First of all, it has a very tight turning radius, and also the steering is extremely light thanks to the Tough Torque gearbox, which runs the power assisted steering. It is such a fun machine to use, and you can fly over all the lawns in no time at all, even if they're quite long. It's very simple to operate with only a few controls: a throttle, the deck engage and disengage lever, the deck higher and lower button, because the deck is fitted with an electric actuator, and the ignition switch. And down here we have the clutch pedal, the pedal which will higher and lower the deck, so you can set it into transport mode so you can drive with the deck up in the air, and of course the forward and reverse rocker pedal. I don't usually like rocker pedals, but this one is absolutely fine, very ergonomical. And then we have the main reason why I like this mower so much: the cutting deck. I've owned a countless number of mowers, and this one is by far the best at cutting in the wet and the dry, and the best at mulching and leaving a very, very clean finish. Out of all of the domestic mowers that I've owned and seen being used, this particular machine, leaves the best finish. So now you're probably thinking, what's so bad about it then? How could it possibly be the best and the worst mower that you've ever owned? Well, I'm going to hand you over to real-time me, and I'll explain.
Well, it's got 78.5 hours on it, and I have repaired this thing so many times for so many different reasons. Some of them probably could have been done under warranty, but I just didn't want the hassle. It'd be so much easier, and it was so much easier just to do it myself. So I did do. So going back to when it had 5 to 10 hours on it, it was basically new. I was happily mowing along, and the link fell out of the steering chain. Not a major problem, just really inconvenient. Very cheap fix, only cost about £3 for the new link. Of course I had to correct where this was and retension it and everything, because it had all fallen out. It was hanging down underneath the mower. But yeah, that was the first thing. I thought, not very good, but okay. So I fixed it, and I was on my way again. As time passed, all seemed good, no problems. Probably got to about 25 hours, maybe 30 hours, don't know for sure. And suddenly, I was mowing. Of course I was mowing, it's a mower. But yes, I was mowing happily along again. I'm always happy on my mower. And I just heard this grinding sound. And I looked down underneath the seat here, and there was a lot of sparks coming out. All these sparks coming out under here, and I was thinking, what's going on with this thing? There's not even anything under there that can spark, is there? I thought maybe the chain's come off again and it's sort of catching a pulley. But no, I had a closer look with the GoPro. I had to put the GoPro underneath, looking up, and I could see that it was the main pulley under here with the bearings in it, the main spindle. And yeah, the bearings had gone. They'd actually gone, they'd imploded, and I had to dismantle that pulley. It was quite simple, just drop it off, put it in the press, put some new bearings in. But yeah, only 25-30 hours and the main bearings had gone. Don't know how well you can see it, but that one there, it's the one on the main pivot point. This bolt is the same bolt that connects to that pulley, and that drives the deck from the engine. So yeah, the bearings were changed, and I continued again. And then we got to, I was refueling one day, no idea what hours we're on now, probably about 40 hours, and I thought there's a lot of oil down there, and I had a good look at the top of the gearbox, and I was trying to find out if it was coming from the gearbox or not. And then yeah, within about 10 seconds realised that we've got the rocker cover here for the engine, and those leak like it's their job. I don't know what it is about these Briggs & Stratton Intech engines, but these nearly always leak. So that was dripping down. I did clean it, but there's still some residue I think come out. Yeah, so I had to change that. I took the rocker cover off, put some new Permatex on, and made sure that was sealed. So that was an oil leak that it developed, probably about 40 hours in, I'm not too sure exactly. And now we're getting close to where we are now at 78 hours, and well, you've guessed it, the head gasket's blown. The head gasket has blown on an engine with 78 hours which has been serviced. I always service my machines. I think the engine oil was changed at 30 hours. Yeah, definitely does not get abused in any way. I always treat my machines with full respect that they deserve. These things are not cheap. And the head gasket has blown. So that brings us to today. We're going to change the head gasket. I think instead of taking the engine out of the machine, I'm going to remove the bonnet or the hood, take the fuel tank out, battery, whatever I can, there's a tray underneath there, and then hopefully pull it off this way. That'll be the easiest way of doing it. So we're going to get it into the workshop. I'm going to change the head gasket. We'll have a good close inspection, and well, I'm sure it won't be the end of the story. So many things have failed so far that there's so many more things that could fail. I'm never going to get rid of this thing, I don't think, because nothing mulches the grass as effectively as that. And I like Stiga anyway. I do like them. Maybe I've just got a bad mower here, but yeah, I do like it. It is the best and the worst mower I've ever owned.
Well, that turned out quite well in the end. I've ended up with a nice work table instead of removing this tray altogether, so that is quite handy. I've also just removed the intake manifold with the carburetor attached to it, so that's just off to the side. It can stay there with the breather hose attached to it. HT leader has been moved out of the way, so we're now ready to remove the head. Now the rocker cover will need to be removed, but I'm probably going to keep that on for now. We'll just remove the head itself in one go, first of all. But before we do, let me just quickly show you where I think it has blown. Basically just here is a very common failing point on these engines. It's too common, to be honest, but they do fail here. This is where the piston is, this is where it's reciprocating very, very quickly. Induction, compression, power exhaust. This is where the push rods are, and actually any pressure, any compression which is escaping through from the piston into here is going to the crankcase, and that increases the crankcase pressure, and that's why I was getting oil oozing out of the fuel pump, because that is operated by the crankcase pressure. So anyway, yeah, I'm expecting to see the damages here, so that will be interesting. Okay, so we've got a 3/8 socket attached. I'm just going to remove these in a fairly random diagonal pattern, but there is a specific pattern for fitting the head again, so probably should remove the spark plug. Does look relatively dirty. I will be changing that. So yeah, the main reason for not removing the rocker cover now is just so I can contain the oil a bit better, because it's all going to go on the gearbox. I could put a tray under there, but I think it's just easier to remove it as one unit. We do have 3 underneath here as well. Access isn't great, but it's a lot easier just using a stumpy extension than removing the tray. We're almost ready to remove the head, so I'm just going to put a load of paper towels under there, because I do strongly suspect there'll be quite a lot of oil still in here. Hopefully not where the piston is, but where the push rods are. Okay, so let's just remove these head bolts. As I said, there is a specific pattern those bottom 3 can stay in. And then we have the push rods just there. So there is actually a fair amount of carbon build-up. I know it's not the easiest to see, but just there is the line of soot, and that's where it's blown. Exactly where I thought it would be, because they're nearly always there. It's such a common failing point. But yep, that's where it's blown through. The exhaust gases have come through here, increased the crankcase pressure, allowed oil to get burnt. And as you can see, there is a lot of carbon on the piston head. Nice and simple fix, really. It is just a case of cleaning everything up and then reassembling. Well, thanks for showing your face, Hoggy. For anybody new to the channel, that is Hoggy. He doesn't really say anything. He's just, well, he always wants feeding, that's the thing. He's looking for food. He's not going to find any here. I'll just try to stop too much dirt from getting into here. I'm going to use a wire wheel just to remove this old gasket. After a good bit of cleaning, there you go. A nice clean surface for the new gasket. Oil free and dirt free. Also clean the chassis as well, because that was covered, absolutely covered in all the bits of gasket, as you can imagine. So now we need to work on the other side of this, the head. Oh, Hoggy, leave that. You don't know where it's been. It's dirty. Here you go, Hoggy. Here's a handful of washers. You count these. Yeah, so while Hoggy undertakes his basic mathematics course, we will get this sorted out. So we do first of all have the steel push rod, and there's also the aluminium push rod. So you need to make sure these go back in the correct places. Although, yeah, if you did have two steel ones, that would also work. So, I think the best thing to do is to now remove the rocker cover. The rocker cover does ideally need to be removed anyway for refitting the push rods, because it just makes it so much easier to get it all fitted back together. Yeah, I definitely did seal it very well, so that's good. Just not so good if you're trying to get back into it again. Okay, there we go. Yeah, nice and clean in here. Very clean. So this gasket surface will be cleaned up using a wire wheel again. Just make sure it's all removed. There is our date, 28th of March 2018. I bought it new in 2020, and I know it was ex-showroom. So yeah, it really hadn't done anything at all until 2020. Need to get it all cleaned up. The reason I took the cover off is because when I spray all the cleaning through here, it will all get in here. I don't want to get it all trapped. So the whole thing needs to be cleaned as one unit. Pretty much as clean as I can get it, I think. I don't know how precisely these are machined in the first place from the factory, but I can try to make it nice and flat. We need a nice flat head. What I've got here is a block of granite and some sandpaper. It has been used before, so it's got a few tears in it. But basically, if I just sand this in like a figure of 8 pattern, I might potentially be able to make it totally flat. It just depends how off it is in the first place. And the place which I'm really targeting, the place which I really want to be flat, is here. But to get that flat, the whole surface needs to be flat. So let's just see. I'll do this for a few minutes and we'll see what it looks like. We'll see how flat it actually becomes, or how not flat it is. Maybe it's very warped, we'll see. So just going to do this roughly in a figure of 8 pattern. Not the easiest, because as I said, there are a few tears on here already on the sandpaper. Keep alternating. Right, okay, so you can see this is the area we're currently sanding, and that is mostly outside of the gasket area. This part here is within the gasket. We haven't even touched the part that blows through. That's where the gasket tends to fail. So yeah, I'll keep going with it, but it looks like it is a long way off flat. And maybe that is why it does fail so often just here. It also gives you a good workout. I'm already out of breath. Well, we're getting there. Wow. It's the sort of thing where if you start doing this, you're sort of committed to doing it, to finishing it. And as you can see, I just have this little piece here and this piece here left to do. But yeah, this was a long way off being flat. So that's not going to help the situation when it comes to blowing head gaskets. You can see the area which blew is now looking a lot better. However, despite doing this, of course we do still have that side of things, and there's nothing I can really do about that. That is likely not flat either, like precisely flat. But at least one side is done, and it should, I hope, make a vast difference. So anyway, yeah, back to my gym session here. Who would have thought that sanding a head would be considered exercise? I'm not overweight, by the way. But this is tiring. It's because I've been doing it for ages. It's taken at least 15 minutes of constant work. Anyway, mustn't complain. At the end of this, I'll have a relatively flat head. And I think I'll need to lie down, to be honest. Ah, there. I think that is good enough. There we go. So, as you can see, we do have mostly a uniform finish there. Not too sure what that oh, it's alright, it's just a dirt off my thumb. So now that we do have this nice, mostly flat, I would say, I can't say it's precisely flat, but yeah, mostly flat finish, we are now ready to fit this head back onto the engine. And to do this, obviously the push rods do need to go through, but the head is fitted first. We don't have to, it's just a lot easier. Now the head gasket will only fit one way, and that is this way. And as you can see, the gasket doesn't even follow the shape of the casting, so it would probably help if they actually made this gasket come out a bit here. But this isn't the only common failing point with these engines. There's also the compression release on the camshaft, which I've already done a video on. And another issue which can happen to these engines, I suppose it can happen to any engine, is the valve seat can pop out. So if you do have an engine like this which has no compression whatsoever, but the connecting rod is not snapped, then chances are the seat has popped out and it's preventing one of the valves from actually going in properly. It's not actually closing correctly. Right, so let's reassemble it. Okay, so at the very top we do have the exhaust valve, and at the bottom we have the intake valve. But as I said, I'm not going to put the push rods in just yet. We do have the two guide pins, so it makes it very easy to align. So there we go. And usually what I tend to do is just tighten the bolts roughly, and then I would torque them. That's with a flat head. But certainly with a head like this, which likes to blow head gaskets, I'm going to do it as the manufacturer would recommend, in 3 different torque settings. So 3 different torquing sessions in 3 different torquing settings. Okay, so yeah, I've just cleaned the heads of these. I'm going to use one of these Milwaukee hex to square drive adapters just to make this a bit faster. You can also use a speed wrench, anything like that, just to do these up. I'm not actually going to tighten them with this. I'm just going to basically get them snug so I can then torque them. To start off with, I'm going to go for 9 Newton meters as the book recommends. We're going to finish off with 25 Newton meters. So yes, we are following a specific pattern as mentioned. This is head bolt 1, and actually that is already there. Number 2 is just here. This one's definitely much further off. Yeah, it is just a very, very minor tighten this. Number 3. And don't worry, I will be time-lapsing the other tightens that we do. Okay, number 4. That's already there. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7, the most difficult one to get to. And number 8. Right, So next up, we're going to go for 17 Newton meters. And then we'll do another tighten where we go to 25. Push rod time. So we do have two different types of push rod. We've got a steel one, which is this one, and we've got the aluminium one. The aluminium one is for the intake, the steel one is for the exhaust. So on this particular engine, the intake is at the bottom, the exhaust is at the top. So, yep, aluminium at the bottom, steel at the top. Just putting a little bit of reassembly oil onto these, just for where they go into their groove, into the valve tappet. Okay, slide them in. And with the push rods fitted, now we just need to put the rockers into their correct positions, and we need to set the clearances. So you probably could avoid this if you wanted to do like a juggling act where you fit the push rods at the same time as the head, but I've always just done it this way. Maybe it is more work, but I find that it's going to be more accurate in the end. We're going to get a much more accurate gap. So just need to remove this locking nut in here so we can back that off, and then we can put the rocker onto the push rod. And of course we cannot have the valve in its open position while setting it, because that's just not going to work at all. The valve clearances for this particular engine for the intake needs to be between 3 and 5 thou, and for the exhaust it needs to be between 5 and 7 thou, or thousandths of an inch. I'm just going to do them both to 5. I found that to work in the past. Of course that is still within spec, so it doesn't want to be too tight on the feeler gauge. Okay, and once we're in the correct position, the correct gap, you need to snug up that nut, and that sets it. Okay, and now we need to do exactly the same thing for the intake. And then when the engine turns, what we should see are the valves opening and closing. There we go. The rocker cover is all cleaned up and it's now ready for some Permatex. I do usually use the grey Permatex, but I don't have any. So I'm using the black Permatex today, but it does have high oil resistance and it does have some high temperature resistance as well. So this is going to be good. And usually I think, oh, I'm applying too much, but I think with these rocker covers, I don't know if there's such thing as too much. So this should be good. It just needs to go tacky. Doesn't want to set totally. Just going to leave it for a few minutes for it to go a little bit tacky, and then it can be fitted. Before I do put the rocker cover on, what I will do is just put a little bit of ultra slick Permatex engine assembly lube in here. Of course, making sure I don't get it on the gasket surface, because that is the beauty of what I've done here. I've totally cleaned it, so I don't have any oil to contend with. This stuff really is ultra sticky, so yeah, sort of comes off in a string. Like stringy cheese. Anyway, yep, I think my gasket surface is nice and clean still, so let's fit the rocker cover. Now when this is tightened fully. Some of it might ooze out, but again, I'm not going to fully tighten it yet. I will snug it up, but I'm not going to fully tighten it. I'm going to leave this for 24 hours before I try and run the engine, just so this sets perfectly. But I can start to rebuild everything else, and then it'd be time to work on the deck, because the deck is in need of a bit of a clean. Well, I've already pressure washed it, but it needs to have some rust converter, rust treatment, and ideally it needs a quick paint just to protect it, not to make it look good, just to protect it from the grass which builds up underneath there. Okay, so about an hour later, final tighten. It's not totally set yet, but that's fine. So in 24 hours roughly, I'll start the engine up and just make sure it's all working. But for now, I can put the muffler back on, the exhaust pipe, battery, fuel tank. I've got a new fuel filter. Once the engine is running, I will change the oil as well, although it's not really super essential at this stage, but yeah, I will do it anyway, just for good measure. And a new spark plug. I was actually amazed about this exhaust pipe, this muffler, because I was expecting it to be held on with 2 bolts on each side and then held on with the manifold as well, but not with the manifold taking the weight. But it isn't. It's got 1 bolt over here, and then the rest of it, all this side, comes from here. It's attached via the head, the cylinder head. And there is actually a bracket welded on here, but it's not used. And I've checked the chassis, and there's never been a bolt through there. So I don't know if they just missed it for this particular machine, or if they just don't use that bracket. I don't know why they bother welding it on. But yeah, I was amazed. To me, it just makes sense for the weight of this to be taken by the frame. And yeah, then this is just basically for transferring the exhaust gases. So that's a new exhaust gasket, and I'm using some copper grease just to prevent these screws from getting stuck in the future, because they do like to, as this is obviously a part which constantly gets hot and then cold, expanding and contracting. Yeah, so it does, it perfectly aligns. This bracket, which is not being used, which is a total mystery, we can get a bolt through there, no problem at all. I can put a serrated nut on the other side. So, well, I guess the reason is access, but it is possible with some long nose pliers. Look at these, very long nose. They're basically tongs. So yeah, that really wasn't too difficult. That is the nut attached. I just need to tighten it, and that takes the strain off the manifold. So I don't know. Maybe they just forgot it on this one machine. I really don't know. As the hole's there, we might as well use it and the bracket to take the strain off that exhaust manifold. Yeah, I thought I'd seen better days. That's quite packed in certain areas. I don't have one. What I'll do is I'll just blow this one out, but I will order one, and I get that fitted as soon as possible. It'll be certainly in there by next season. Now's a good opportunity to fit the spark plug. So I've got a genuine Briggs & Stratton there. And there's the original. Yeah, the original one actually is a Champion. I don't think I've changed it before. I'll just put the battery on charge as well. I think it actually needs to be replaced soon, but that was a little bit low. It was running a bit flat. So yes, in the morning when I come to try this out, it should be all good, and hopefully the engine starts without any problems. For now though, let's move on to the deck. So as you can see, the deck is not too bad. There is some rust and some flaking paint, but what I'm going to do is just quickly go over it with a wire wheel, and then I'll coat it with this rust converter, aqua steel. Yeah, I'll take the blades off first. With the deck rust treated and painted with this very thick protective paint, I can now move on and we can try out the mower. Let's see if the engine starts. That's the fuel tank and the battery clamped back in again. I'm going to keep the bonnet off for the time being. So now that we know that the engine works, it's time to sharpen the blades. And they're not terrible. I did sharpen these probably 20-30 hours ago, probably 20 hours ago. So they just need a bit of a clean up. It's always best to scrape off the dry grass here because that can affect the accuracy of the balancing when we come to balance it. But yeah, just needs a quick clean up. It actually looks worse in the back, but really there is still quite a good edge on there.
We're ready. Let's go and mow. Oh, and Hoggy just couldn't resist. I said it's too dangerous, but he wasn't having it. So there he is. He's tied on. He's not going to have the greatest view. It's a little vertical, that, although this will lower down when I lower the deck. But anyway, let's go.
And there we have it. The mower is once again working like a brand new machine with nice sharp blades and a perfectly working engine. Also, it's nice not to have the smell from the oil being burnt. It was very noticeable. Even without seeing the smoke, you could tell there was an issue with it. Anyway, that is it for this video. I really do hope you've enjoyed it. I'll be doing more videos similar to this very soon, so please do remember to like and subscribe. And until then, see you again very soon. Bye for now.